It's so fitting, by the way, that my last episode of this show, we finally make it about dating, as the title has always suggested.
Yeah, this is the natural conclusion.
Except it's not a dating show, it's a breakup show.
I think we both believe in, I don't even know what the right term is.
Conscious uncoupling.
That is in
That's
fact
what you're talking about.
Yes, conscious uncoupling.
Conscious uncoupling.
I'm Ben Smith.
I'm Nayeema Raza.
And this is Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media.
Today, we're going to talk about brand and change and about changing your brand. We'll be joined by Melissa Hobley, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Tinder and one of my favorite CMOs in the game.
And she's also, I think she's sort of at the front line of a big trend everybody in media is wrestling with, which is people are sick of looking at their screens, trying to get off of digital platforms. And if the business you're in is fundamentally about digital platforms, that's a really complicated, interesting business challenge.
And we will talk to her about that kind of digital exhaustion, that kind of brand rejuvenation as I fly away on my new show, Ben. I'm trying to rebrand too in this episode.
Yeah, what's your rebrand, Nayeema? Where are you going? I think I don't really understand it.
You don't? It's because it's, targeting a Gen Z audience, maybe. No. Anyways, we'll talk about all of that after the break. We have been planting the seeds for this since the election and intimated over the last few episodes, including that soft launch we had with Colin and Samir.
Yeah, I can't believe you hijacked that episode to get professional advice, but what can you do?
Well, it's time. Listeners of Mixed Signals, today is my last episode, and I am so excited to stay a listener of the show, but I am going to launch a solo show called Smart Girl, Dumb Questions.
I thought that was this show.
No, Ben. Do you think you're the smart girl?
But in which I am the smart girl, yes.
Of course, Ben.
And
I
get to ask the dumb questions. So what is it?
I just wanted to throw a curiosity party, a place to ask questions, to be curious, and to talk about ideas and things that have been sometimes marginalized to like the pages of lifestyle, but I think get to the heart of how people live and vote. And that's what the show's about. Should we play a bit of the trailer?
Let's hear it.
Is my phone spying on me? Why is it harder to fall in love as we get older? When are we moving to Mars? And does size really matter in government? I'm Nayeema Raza. I've spent the last 5 years asking questions at places like the New York Times, Vox, and New York Magazine. I'm smart about some things, dumb about lots of other things, and curious about absolutely everything. But sometimes really important questions don't get asked, either because it's embarrassing not to know the answer or because we assume we already do. This show is here to ask those dumb questions, saving you from the under-the-table footsie with Google or from your cousin's totally unhinged TikTok takes. Each episode, I'll interview someone who actually understands the answers to the questions we're all wondering about. Are my AirPods giving me cancer? What is cancer? Is my money actually at the bank? Why are we having fewer babies? What do I do if I see a bear? What happens when you die? How do we know?
I mean, that sounds like a lot of stuff that you wanted to do on this show, and I'm pretty excited to hear it. And we'll stick a link to the trailer in the show notes.
Yes, as you guys are covering the business of media, I will be trying to build a business in media.
Yeah, we'll have you back on in a few months to see how it's going, see what you've learned. I feel like one of the really fun things about starting from scratch is that like 50% of what you believe is right and 50% is wrong, and you just like get to learn on the fly, which is which
don't
half
know
is
which 50.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, listeners of Mixed Signals will be hearing you in conversation with Max Tani a lot more. That will be fun for them, and I will be listening too.
Max's, coup has finally succeeded here. And I'm glad we're finishing on one of these episodes where like we found like the pretty big overlap of our Venn diagrams.
Which is you wanted to talk to a CMO and I wanted to talk about dating?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like these companies and brands that are like having to totally reshape their identities in this transformed media ecosystem. And you wanted to talk about dating.
Well, no, I think the rebrand that Melissa Hobley has overseen at Tinder is really amazing. And actually, I came to know Melissa years before. I was writing a piece about dating in the pandemic in 2020. She, at the time, was CMO of OkCupid. And she had done a rebrand there, too, where actually that was kind of like trying to sex up OkCupid versus her job at Tinder has been trying to like make it more of a relationship app.
Like sex it down slightly even.
Exactly.
I mean, and it's an incredibly interesting, challenging job in an industry that, by the way, is really struggling. Like these are companies whose stock prices have, fallen by, like 50% and more over the last few years. As dating apps are sort of at risk of going out of fashion in general, in a world where people are sick of, as they are across the digital media, sick of screens, sick of these digital engagements, and so it's just like a genuinely interesting business and an interesting marketing job.
I tried to write that story too in the summer of 2021, and Melissa kind of like threw me off the trail a little bit. I was trying to get the data because I was like, people don't want to be on their phones at all. People are not wanting to date on the internet. Real life was back. Bumble was throwing these like real life parties. And I'm like, send me user numbers. And everybody kept sending me user numbers that looked good because they would just choose the metric that, didn't show decline, when actually they were competing against real life and Instagram, which is a great dating app itself.
I wouldn't know.
That's good, Ben.
Yep.
All right, let's have Melissa join us. Melissa, thank you for being here.
Nayeema, thank you so much for having me.
You're such a treat. I love it.
You're a treat. This is the only meeting I look forward to for the whole week.
Wow.
People will be so happy when they hear that, Melissa,
Yeah.
everyone that's been meeting with you.
No, that's a good, candid way to start. Appreciate it.
Don't tell them.
Yes. This is the reason why Melissa is such a fun interview. Ben actually heard you on his own. I was surprised he was paying attention to the Tinder CMO. But in fact, Ben has become a chief consumer of CMO podcasts.
And listened to a lot of CMO podcasts. And I think the single best interview I heard was you on that Uncensored CMO show.
Oh my gosh, Ben, thank you so much.
I should say this is a fairly low bar that we're setting.
Listen, I know CMOs are like a bit scripted, aren't they? I'm not.
Ben, he give it, then he take it away. But here's the thing. So it's so good to see you. We were just talking about your storied career as a marketer. Obviously, you've had a long career in this. In the dating world, Melissa and I got to know each other in 2020 in the pandemic when we were working on my dating story at the New York Times.
By the way, it was also so lovely because we were both like in houses in the middle of the woods and we didn't know each other. And I think we talked for like 2.5 hours. You were so interesting and you...
I was pandemic quarantined with like two men, neither of whom I was dating. It was a very interesting situation. Anyways, so that's all for the new show.
Yeah, wrong podcast, guys. All right.
But what I was saying is that when you did this job at OkCupid, which is where you were in 2020, you were kind of sexing the place up. You ran that DTF campaign that was like, DTF, fall in love. The sweet part of OkCupid, which was really the nerdy dating app. I can say that as I have some experience in this app world. And now you're kind of reversing that at Tinder, going from the one-night stand to the two-night stands. Talk about that shift. Talk about going from one company to the other. And talk about what's unique about dating.
Yeah, it is a wild business to be in. And part of the reason is because, there's like a million reasons. One is most people fucking hate dating. And so being a CMO at a dating app or at Tinder is just hard because most people are like, I just hate dating until they meet their person. And then like, oh my God, I love Tinder. And so you have two extremes. Also, dating has been tough for women since the dawn of civilization. The word dating doesn't exist in most languages. So there's a lot of things that make it hard to be in this space. But I love it. I really love it. I loved working at OkCupid. That was an app that I was like, wait, is it still around? When they were like, we're looking for a CMO, I was like, who's on this? Or is it at the Renaissance fairs? Like, who's on it? But I think one of the things you do when you're a CMO is you say, well, what's the truth? Like, what's a real truth, a real insight here? And one of the insights with OkCupid was that it was famous for asking these questions. And OkCupid was started by these Harvard math graduates who were like, we're nerds. We can't find anybody. Tech's helping us in this part of our lives. Why isn't it helping me meet someone? And they would create all of these questions, and the other folks that you could potentially match with, you saw there was a percentage that reflected how aligned you were in certain things. And when I joined, Trump had just been elected, and there was a lot in the air, and we just started leaning into, well, I wouldn't date somebody that didn't support reproductive rights. Can I filter on that? And no one had that. No one was talking about that. People still don't talk about that. And so that was one of the first things we did at OkCupid was create a pro-choice filter, basically, and allow you to match on that.
Do you, in retrospect, regret that at all? Like, it feels like one of the things that that is driving everyone insane about America right now is
No.
these sort of deepening social divisions.
No, I not only do I not regret that, I wish we had done it more. And I'll tell you why. For certain issues, one is dating apps and Tinder in particular get a little bit bad rap of like, it's all appearance. You just have to be hot. It's hot or not. And that's all it is. And so one of the things I think about all day long, like keeps me up at night, is like, how do I get you to bring your issues to your profile? Because compatibility. Now, if you're just looking for fun, whatever. Like I don't need to know like your long, the scholars you read on climate change. I don't need to know that if I'm just looking for something fun. Although, quick side note, increasingly women are not going to just flirt or have fun if they don't see there are issue deal breakers, even if you're not looking for something long term. But if you go to compatibility and you talk to Esther Perel and others, caring about the same shit is an ingredient to a long and happy relationship. And notice I said happy, right? And so it's actually an important ingredient if you want that.
So this is one of the areas where I think you're just so fascinating, Melissa, because you really believe you've been a longtime advocate for brands taking political positions, which is just kind of out of favor now. Here's a clip of you giving an interview. I think this is in 2022, and you're making an argument for why brands need to speak up more politically.
There's a business case for taking a stand on social and political issues. There is a business case for speaking on Roe. Every single week, there is a piece of research that says Gen Z is going to over-index on what did this company say about this issue? How did they react?
Later, you call it a no-brainer. So fast forward 2 years in the 2024 election. Do you still think that?
Yeah.
Why?
I do. One reason is, so my business is Gen Z, right? And if you're, for most dating apps, there's just way more single people under 30 than there are, right? As we get older, we get picked off. But if you're looking, in particular with Gen Z, they over-index on researching a brand's stance on issues, if they're showing up on issues, who are they donating to, all of those things. So one is Gen Z is taking an interest. Second, I think kind of coupled with that, we no longer just care. And, social media has changed everything in terms of like the relationship we actually have with brands. And it is not what it was 30 years ago where it's like, well, I like Nike and I'll always buy Nike. Now it's, what do they stand for? Who are they partnering with?
But do you worry, a lot of young people, I think, moved substantially to the Republican Party this cycle. And do you worry, like you're saying, oh, this is one app we got, one product for the right, one product for the left? I mean, the other thing about Nike was that apocryphal Michael Jordan line about Republicans buying sneakers.
Here's what I think. I think in one area, like in one piece that's driving your strategy is turning all of that off. And I'll give an example, like LGBTQ rights. I deeply believe that personally, and I believe that for the company. And by the way, I also see the direct correlation to my business at Tinder in having a growing LGBTQ community. And so, but even if I didn't, I think there's a lot of folks that would say, well, this is a human rights issue. It's not a right or left issue. Maybe it is embraced or supported more by one side, but I'm going to have a stance on that issue.
It is funny because dating apps are like in the thick of the gender war stuff we've just seen in this election. Pronouns, like, do you want to be a trad wife? Do you want to be a girl boss? These kinds of modalities, they really exist in the world you're operating in. And then, by the way, there's a competitor out there, the Right Stuff, which is the Peter Thiel app, which was founded by John McEntee, Trump's former aide. Right-wing dating app. I mean, what stops Tinder from becoming a meme of that on the left?
First, Tinder is the biggest in the world in every single metric, in every single way that you want to look at something. And what I've learned being in this industry for 8 years is it is really hard to launch an app, to grow an app, to get scale. Mm-hmm. It is like marketing a dating app is like marketing a nightclub or a bar or a coffee shop in every city in the world, 365 days a year.
I mean, you've had this challenge of you have to really change how people perceive your core product. And you talked about taking Tinder from a place where customers saw it as a sleazy bar to a place where people saw it as a cozy wine bar. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, one is, again, kind of back to like the truth. What's the truth? What is the data? Like, what are the insights of the product? And almost half the people on Tinder are looking for something serious. And that's been true for a while. So one is, I think like a 20-year-old bro somewhere at some point said, this is the F for hookups, because they wanted it to be that. It's not really how women date or connect or seek out like a great date or connection. It's just we don't see, there's not a real business in building a product like that. So second, like I get all the wedding invitations. I get all the baby announcements. And so like the hundreds and thousands of DMs we get, the emails, the TikToks, all of those things, we see and we know and we experience all of those meaningful stories. And so one of the things was, okay, the narrative has really gone off the rails. So let's start talking about what really happens here and who's here. And by the way, also the leadership at Tinder today is all women and one guy. And so we bring that female experience to the storytelling, to the experience, and to the product.
In some sense, are you basically primarily selling to women? And then if they're there, the men will show up no matter what? I mean, is that kind of the marketing logic?
You know, it's interesting. It's not so much the logic, it's the reality of think about like all bars of the 80s and 90s and even today, ladies' nights free. And why was that?
Oh,
because you always have, the guys are always there.
Yeah.
Like, think about nightclubs. Like, there's always a ton of dudes, and they're like, you can't get in unless you have some girls with you. So men are always showing up, always, and always in stronger numbers, always more frequency.
And so these beautiful campaigns you're doing, you're really thinking, and when you're focus grouping them, you're like looking at women.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, there's like a lot of economic studies around this, like marketplaces. You need the women to come in.
So I've discovered the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the limiting factor of how successful.
Was that thing about dumb questions?
Exactly. Don't worry about it. I have a co-host opportunity for you.
You should do a podcast on smart people, dumb questions. Not a dumb question. It's actually like, it's not obvious.
Thanks, Melissa. I feel better.
So one of the things that I think, it wasn't just the narrative that got away from Tinder, it was the reality of this company, right? The way it had been built. And Whitney Wolfe Herd, who started Bumble, obviously created a whole enterprise being the anti-Tinder in a way, right? The place for women to date. And so you inherited, I think, not just a challenging narrative and challenging perception, but also some history to the company that has obviously evolved. Now, one of the things I think has been really interesting about how you've approached it was Tinder's advantage, to the extent that there is one in the dating market, is like it's the organic app. It's not the app you go to for a relationship, but it's one where you might find one. And that has a value in a world where it's not the intense app where everyone's like trying to get married. It's the app where people are trying to have fun, which might end up in a baby or a wedding invite or whatever it is.
Yeah, totally. And when I came in, we really had to be like, okay, what is Tinder? If Disney is magic and Snickers is satisfaction and Red Bull is adrenaline, like, what are we? And what we kept coming back to was, there's lots of people that have found their person here. And now when I go and speak at something or I'm in a big room and I have the microphone, I always like to have the microphone, I say, who here knows somebody in a serious relationship from Tinder? And 99% of the room, the hand shoots up. And that's unbelievably powerful. We all know many people that are in a serious relationship from someone they met on Tinder. But we also have so many people that are like, listen, I just got out of something. I want to see what happens. I don't want to meet my person tomorrow. And so really it was about like telling those stories. And I think when you're marketing, the magic is really when you can be like, what is the product truth? What is that?
So if Disney is magic and Snickers is satisfaction and Red Bull's adrenaline, what is Tinder?
Possibilities.
Possibilities.
I mean, I think one of the big challenges just for the sector, and I think you're in this situation where you have the biggest player in the whole sector. So basically, I think a lot of the ups and downs of Tinder are the whole industry and sort of secular. And people hate being online. People hate screens. I think Tinder's seen a 10% decline paying users, MAUs. I think that's probably industry wide. And I'm curious, sort of how you are managing like that big picture. And I thought because it's something we think about in media all the time, right? Like just this people wanting to pull back from screens, from their phones.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is going to sound maybe controversial, hot take. We should be putting our phones down more. I actually believe that. I think that we are lonely, we are anxious. What was the piece in the Atlantic about like exporting anxiety? Like it's one of our greatest exports from Gen Z. So I believe in that. But here's what I'll also say. When people are like, I'm over dating apps, I don't want to do it, they are often not doing anything else. And when people are like, I hate apps, whatever, we actually only exist because women have more agency and autonomy. So and I spend a lot of time with cultural anthropologists and sociologists and the Kinsey Institute, and what I need to know is how are people getting together and how are we helping that? And the truth is, we're not going to bars like we used to. I met my husband in a bar in the West Village. We're not going to bars like we used to. And some of that is really good. It's because we're in grad school. It's because women are in the workforce more. It's because we're sober. It's because we don't want to be in a bar situation. I think it's awesome that you don't have to be in a bar to meet someone.
But if you are in the alcohol business, you might not think that, right?
Well, sure, but
I mean, you guys are in the advertising business. And ultimately, isn't there a pressure to keep people on the app more from a commercial perspective, even if it's good for the world? I mean, I think it's something people in media think about a lot too.
Absolutely not. Our advertising business is so tiny for our revenue. Most of our revenue is from subscription. And I want to get you on a date and I want to get you off.
Yeah.
And I want to get you off. You know what I mean? In all the ways. Yeah. And so I 100% no. And this is really a word of mouth game. Tinder exploded and went to a insane MAU and $1 billion in revenue almost overnight. And why was that? Is because people were talking about it and like, this is an easy way to make connections. This is an easy way to find someone. And so we don't want to keep you on the app. I want you to get on the date. I want you to meet the person. I want you to see if there's chemistry and I want to get you off.
One of the things about your business is you're constantly replenishing your consumer base because there are young people coming into the dating market all the time, as well as people breaking up, divorcing, et cetera. But like a lot of young people, you have the pulse of like the young consumer. I mean, I would imagine that you guys would be spending a lot more on marketing, have a lot more data on audiences, like be extraordinary marketers because you were seeing how people are behaving in a very intimate, personal, vulnerable way.
Yeah. And by the way, like when you're dating, like nothing in your closet is good enough. So like, I don't know, fashion brands do really well when they advertise on Tinder and beauty. You're like, I couldn't possibly wear anything. I have to have something new, right? That feeling of like, whatever. We take everything you give us very, very seriously. We really do. And I think there is a place for advertising. But I don't think advertising is going to be like the make or break for us. I think we know that we offer Tinder Platinum and that lets you set your location to anywhere in the world, for the travelers out there, or you're moving or you're going to be on a study abroad and you can meet people there. So our subscription offers are really great, and that's where the value creation is, that's where the real revenue is coming in.
So you're never going to be like Uber when all of a sudden like Uber now is just advertising while you're waiting for your car.
Oh my gosh, it's just advertising, right? You open it up and you're like, oh.
It's incredible.
I know. So Tinder won't become like that one day.
I don't think so.
Okay, good. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Melissa Hobley.
This week on our branded segment from Think with Google, I spoke with Google's VP of Marketing, Josh Spanier, about how AI is redefining measurement. So there's this legendary line about advertising. Half the money we all spend on advertising is wasted, but the only challenge is figuring out which half. Does AI have a role to play in figuring out which half?
I'm going to answer that question, but first I'm going to talk about how England lost the European Championship of Soccer this summer against Spain. I'm still bitter about that. But the one thing I can say is during that campaign, our Pixel marketing campaign was successful and did win, the only winner as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of that success came from some AI technologies and AI solutions, which actually helped us answer that question about which half of the campaign was working. We made all of it work.
For example?
So we do creative testing and we put our assets, our ads into this creative testing machines, and lots of people write comments about that, and we always miss those comments because no one had time to read through them. So we took all the qualitative comments that people said and had the AI tell us what was going on. And what it uncovered was that about half the people liked all the music in the ads and half the people didn't. And the scores averaging out just said the music's fine, but the AI told us actually it's not fine. So we went back and changed all the music and got much better results. And we were able to do this before the campaign actually launched. And one of the secrets to AI is the speed at which it moves is allowing us to actually affect things before we actually go live versus where measurement has been, which is you have to wait months and months post-campaign before you get a result.
And it sounds like you can also basically take qualitative feedback in real time, not just ratings.
100%. AI is making us smarter before, during, and after campaigns. And that's a huge unlock because measurement historically has been you only find out answers way past the point where you can ever affect change. One thing my team has done on this Pixel campaign over the summer is we actually used predictive analytics to identify audiences to actually forecast what would make the campaign optimally more successful.
Where can people read more about this?
So the latest installment of Inside Google Marketing can be found at thinkwithgoogle.com. My colleague Michael Bailey has written this brilliant article. It's recently published. Inside Google Marketing at thinkwithgoogle.com.
Thanks, Josh. On the other side of the ad business, the ads you're buying, I mean, in another place, the world has changed a lot. Curious how you're thinking about shifting your spend next year. I mean, in particular, you have this relationship with Alex Cooper, call her daddy, and podcasts are obviously the kind of hot new medium. You're not that new, but really hot. How are you thinking about the changing world of ad buying over the next year?
Oh, that's a really good question. One, we really love Alex Cooper because she stands for things that we believe in. We're very loud in reproductive rights. She's got a real point of view there. And she talks about sex and dating in such a real and raw way. Because, by the way, like the challenge for me a little bit is we're not just the hookup app. Like we were actually never that. However, the era of slut shaming I wish was gone and dead and buried like a long, long time ago. And so it's also no judgment. You want to do you want to have fun, whatever, like no judgment, go do you. And Alex is this kind of really amazing voice of that and making women feel really good for the first time. I mean, I didn't grow up with that. Like being called a slut was the worst thing you could be called. And so how beautiful to have women out there like probably like, yeah, go take care of you. But when we think about buying, we think about like, where am I going to reach women? Where can I like tell that story and that message? We love podcasts because it's an opportunity to tell that story. Like, we're all fighting for attention and, an ad comes on, we know you're on your phone, right? And so I think a lot about what's the equity of the person that I want to be, part of like what Tinder is about, and putting the dollars there. We're trying to be more thoughtful, like with the dollars in terms of like the voices and the people that we work with.
What do you mean?
We want to spend more with women. We want to spend more with BIPOC creators.
And a lot of what you do is influencers and creators.
Yeah, a lot.
Like a lot of the marketing is going there.
Yeah, a lot there. And a lot with LGBTQ voices. I mean, you can't actually understate, and as Nayeema referenced earlier, we're sitting on more insights and data on how we're showing up in the world than anybody else because we have 3 billion swipes a day. It's, we're number 150 countries. It's so interesting. And so how do you keep pushing the product to like show up for those folks? But then how do I tell the stories and where does that? Wait, let me ask you guys, are you podcasts have had such an explosion in interest? Do you feel that interest from different brands? And is it ever hard to be like, oh, we don't really want to take that?
Well, yeah, we have a monogamous relationship here at Mixed Signals. Ben is in a monogamous relationship with Google. I know that's not in fashion right now, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's an interesting, I mean, we're trying to, some of we're very much like a B2B advertising market. And so our advertisers are not so much interested in a mass audience as in people who are really dialed into these businesses and running them and things like that. And so that's true on the web and in newsletters and very successful there and in physical events. That's a much much less mature audience in podcast world, and we're sort of trying to figure it out. It's interesting.
The other thing you're seeing in podcasts is that there's a real move away from CPMs to sponsorship deals. And the CPMs for podcasting, the metrics and the tracking weren't that good in the beginning of the business, and now they are getting sharper, and affiliate referral codes, et cetera.
Are you selling Melissa an ad here on your new show?
I am. We were discussing. I got to become more queer to get that Tinder money. But I do think that there is a reality of like sponsorship, and podcasts are increasingly going to get scrutiny now after this election. And I think that will come back to brands. I have often said to Ben, like when the Andrew Huberman piece came out, I'm like, there is no regulator of Andrew Huberman except for Athletic Greens.
I'm curious, just as somebody because I think you have a brand that you're trying to tell people about, and you just have an app that you're trying to get people to download. And I think for a lot of people in your position, most of the marketing dollars they spend, what that really means is sort of paid app installs and very kind of like bottom of funnel, super programmatic, gritty spending. And there's a huge tension of like any given dollar. Do I spend it, producing and airing this like beautiful moving ad about my brand identity, or do I spend it like churning installs? And I'm curious how you think about that balance, how you see it shifting.
I love that question because I do not believe that much in the lower funnel performance stuff. I really don't. I think, but that's also maybe a reflection of like where Tinder is and where OkCupid was, which is I need to change your mind about our brand, and I need to make you think about, you know what? Yeah, I'm not really doing anything to like meet somebody, and I really want that. I want that more than anything else in my life right now, and maybe I'll give you a try. And that's not going to come from like meet hot singles in your area. I wouldn't run an ad like that anyway. But can you imagine? But so I think that we have become, and I think the pendulum's starting to shift back. I think that marketers have became upset. Like if you couldn't measure it, why would you do it? And I just deeply reject a lot of that. I need to build an emotional connection with you, and it's not going to come from some programmatic, super low funnel, like clicky, whatever. And also to your point, like I look at churn. I want you to, we call it happy deletes. When you leave us, we say, hey, before you leave, could you tell us like, why are you leaving? I met someone on Tinder. I met someone somewhere else. I just need a break. I hate you. Please don't ever talk to me again. Like we kind of ask these things. And so we're looking at like, oh, are you deleting because you met someone? Or are you leaving for something else? And so and listen, I think they're getting really interesting. One of the things that this was an eye-opening moment at OkCupid, which was when I ran podcast, when I brought someone in from a podcast ad, their behavior was different. The behavior was different, meaning they were more engaged. They were more likely to send a message. And it's because they were hearing a little bit more about that story, which is very unique to podcasts, and especially for like the host-read format, right? Like people like Nayeema, they like Ben.
There's a parasocial relationship.
Yes, yeah.
This is real music to the ears of people. I would say both of like people want to make interesting advertising and of people trying to do quality media. Because the other thing about meet hot signals in your area is it's just you can't build a news organization or a media organization on that stuff.
No, and I think I think have you seen like how the Washington Post is like creating these like very funny like recaps of stories for TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. But it's created an emotional connection, I think, for people that wouldn't have even thought about that as like a source. And so so I'm so in on brand. I'm so in on brand. And I think that, it's funny, like Mark Cuban, I didn't appreciate this when I first started on Shark Tank. He used to basically, what he was trying to get to really quickly is, are you a marketing machine or people like your product? And what he was trying to get to is like, oh, you're just like really good at like digital acquisition and like performance marketing. People don't really want your product.
You think that's going out of fashion? Because that's a whole generation of companies.
Of course it's going out of fashion. I mean, the money's not there for that. Like, you cannot pay more to acquire a customer than you can in keeping the customer. I mean, that's then the reality learned by venture capital and you have all these companies that have market caps that are lower than the money they raised. But also, Melissa, you've hedged your business, because if online dating apps don't work out, Melissa also runs a matchmaking business. on the side. She does not charge for it.
I'm not hedging because it's free. It's like my own personal nonprofit.
Well, that's just a teaser. You're going to turn on the premium tier at some point, presumably.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Wait, yeah, what's the business model? You bring them in for free, and then you're like, oh, it'll be $50,000 a year. No, I never in a million years. But yes, I started meeting interesting people and frankly, a lot of people in media. And it's harder for some folks. Initially, it's because it was harder for folks to be on an app when you're publicly recognizable. And so I have a Google spreadsheet of lovely, and now they're not only media. It's just like if I meet folks that are interesting, I'm like, and they're really are like, they have a lot of intentionality and they want to meet someone, I might say, hey, I connect people. I kind of do matchmaking on the side. I'll put you on my spreadsheet, but it's very reactive. You may never hear from me, or you will hear from me in a month and I'll say, okay, so I met this guy. I think he's interesting. Or do you want to meet him? And then I just put you both in touch and there you go.
It starts with a swipe or it starts with a cell in Excel. That's what it is.
You gotta keep workshopping that one.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for doing this.
Thanks, Melissa. This was really fascinating.
You guys were so great. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you all more questions, but
that's for your podcast.
It's for my new podcast. You can ask me questions.
I cannot wait for Naeema's new podcast. I cannot wait for it.
Thank you.
This girl knows everyone and has the most interesting contacts. Her phone is so interesting. Her texts are so interesting. And to have her ask the questions that we all want to ask, but from the coolest, most interesting people in the world, I'm so here for that.
Melissa,
it's gonna be good.
She sounds like a sponsor already, huh? What do you think, then?
You're just always working it, Nayeema.
Thanks, Melissa. Oh, Melissa. She's great, no?
Yeah, super interesting person right in the middle of a lot of different stories.
Exactly. Well, let's have Max on. He was listening, so let's have Max join us for this debrief. Hi, Max.
Hey, how's it going? We're checking voyeur in my box today for my Tinder preferences. I was listening in on that, but not saying anything.
Did you find yourself to be Tinder curious?
I thought it was really interesting. I haven't been on Tinder in a few years, but I found it super, super fascinating. One of the things that was the most interesting to me was the fact that she said how much ads were such a small slice of their business compared to subscriptions, which to me, that struck me as kind of a one thing that I think could be an issue because presumably, right, the people who are subscribing are the folks who are desperate, to get either dates or, to meet someone. And, they're putting in more effort. They're willing to spend a little bit more to kind of get that. Presumably, these people want to not subscribe at some point, right? They're not subscribers you can really rely on. You're going to churn through those people pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think you'd be surprised. I think a lot of people stay single for a long time, Max. But I think it's also it's the same business. I mean, she gave the analogy of bars and clubs in Vegas kind of thing. It's like women dine for free, women come in for free, and you need a bunch of paying subscribers who are probably predominantly men.
That was so obvious, but also so interesting to me that of course 100% of the advertising, which is ubiquitous, is aimed at women. It's sort of interesting but obvious.
You could imagine there is a version of a dating app that looks like Uber looks right now, which I find it's such a high friction experience where I'm just trying to find out which corner my car is on, and instead it's trying to sell me insurance or something on my Uber app now. And you could imagine Tinder being in the advertising game, but I think it would be a terrible product experience for someone who's already trying to find something to have a high friction ad load.
That's totally true. It's like going to a bar and seeing a bunch of display a bunch of billboards or something like that on the wall. It's very bizarre.
You don't like that space above the urinals where they do that?
Do they actually have that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See that. Yeah, they used to. Not necessarily premium advertisers there either.
Or premium bars, actually.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was really interesting about Melissa, her perspective on brands taking political positions. I find this fascinating and very possible for her because of the unique audience she is serving. And, I have had this conversation with Melissa and with people like Esther Perel around what does it mean that we're not dating people who think differently than us? Is this good? Is this we're getting into values overlap? Or is this just the next iteration of kind of biased dating?
I was surprised how comfortable she was with it, honestly. I was a little surprised that she didn't say, no, of course not. But maybe the underlying reality is that Gen Z women are obviously pretty liberal, and ultimately the men are going to go wherever the women are, and she's marketing to Gen Z women.
So you think that the next election will swing left because men want to date liberal women?
Or that just like ultimately, I mean, it's sort of reassuring, right? Maybe ultimately this stuff in which people say in polls they refuse to date somebody of the alternate party is going to be swept away by the realities of sex and love and dating. And so, because I think that to me is one of the things about gender gaps that are obviously, they're just fundamentally less politically toxic than racial division, right? Because you ultimately in the gender wars, you got to find some way to live together.
Yeah.
The easiest way to test that theory, the idea of, I would never date someone with political views different than mine, is to show them a bunch of very attractive pictures of that person and to see whether that holds true.
But I do think this question of like, for all of us, like you're in the digital screen business at a moment when like people's deepest desire is to spend less time looking at screens. And so I think like, you have to have some promise that is, we are a way to help you do this less, not we're another rabbit hole for you to fall down.
But I think that there's the reality of like so many people that are dating, and she didn't get into her market segmentation and whatnot, but there are so many people who are dating who are like single mothers who have a job and have children, and they don't have time to go like sit and have a martini and have someone approach them, or they don't live in a town where that's possible. And so I think there's a built-in reality that the digital dating game will be in business for a long time and is a part of the future. Although I think there was recently an Axios study that showed that Gen Z was avoiding dating apps, and I certainly feel post-pandemic there's been a desire to pull back from.
Yeah, there's a backlash. But ultimately we don't know any other way to live. So it's than digitally.
And also, we've also closed off all these other spaces for dating. Like, you cannot date at work. You cannot date at, we've made dating harder in real life, partly because of the culture. And so dating apps have become a place where somebody's single.
That's a really interesting observation. It sounds like a great subject for a new podcast.
For a new podcast. We've been bigging up my podcast, Max, Smart Girl, Dumb Questions.
Absolutely.
How are we, the real question, Max, is how are we going to defeat it in the ratings?
Oh, please. It's not a competition. I'm so excited for Max to be on the show more. I'm a big Max Tani fan. As you know, from our first episode, I said Max should be a YouTuber, but he hasn't gone to do it. So now I'm going to go do it.
I know. Meanwhile, the feedback, we've gotten a lot of we want more Max Tani feedback. So here it is.
Well, be careful what you wish for. That's what I have. That's my message to those folks. Obviously, we're not trying to beat Nayeema in the ratings because the one thing that we do know about podcasting is that network effects are incredibly real, right? Like the best way to promote your podcast is to be bros with another podcast and to kind of create this whole extended universe of characters. So,
oh my God, are we going to be bros, guys?
I mean, no, but kind of like the truly the friend of the pod designation, like that to me feels incredibly crucial to the success of every chatty podcast.
Don't bring your Gen X competitive energy to our podcast space, Ben.
Max will be a perfect, is it smart girl to ask dumb questions for this?
Well, I'll be a smart guy asking dumb questions here too. So it's
you're not qualified for my spinoff, which will obviously be dumb guy ask smart questions. That podcast exists in many forms.
That's actually the single most successful form of media.
Yes.
So Max, Ben, tell me, my podcast bros, what are people going to hear more of in the rest of the season?
I mean, I think a lot of the same questions we've been asking on this show, and we're going to miss you. I'm obsessed with, and I think we're all actually obsessed with the extent to which these really vast changes in the media business, which we saw play out through the election and through last year in terms of where the power was, where the energy was, where the audience was, are going to, in 2025, I think they're going to sort of crash into the business of media and the choices that, that advertisers, that executives, that big companies are making. You're going to see, I think you're going to see some podcasters get very, very rich. And you're going to see, I think, things that we think of as legacy media doing pretty desperate stuff. And ultimately, I think you're going to see a really fast convergence between those two things.
Max, what are you excited to do more of on Mixed Signals?
I'm gonna be the dumb guy asking dumb questions. I'm excited. No. I'm really excited for it. I think
stop trying to steal my podcast. All right. Well, I will be listening. I'll come back and report on what it's like to build a media business independently from scratch in this day and age.
Yeah, and we'll be rooting for you and listening.
Can't wait to hear.
Thank you. Look how quickly he turned. He was like, how do we beat her? Oh, we'll be rooting for you.
Sorry, you know what I'm like.
How to believe Ben Smith. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media. Our show is produced by Max Tani and Sheena Azaki, with special thanks to Max Toomey, Britta Galanis, Chad Lewis, Rachel Oppenheim, Anna Pizzino, Garrett Wiley, and Jules Zern. Today's episode was mixed by Steve Bone. Our theme music is by Billy Libby. And our public editor is Johnny McEntee, the former Trump aide who launched The Right Stuff, the right-wing dating app, which you can go to if you'd like to find love in the red zone.
I have no idea how that's going. We should look into it. I wonder how that marketing is doing at attracting women.
I did for a story. I was doing a creative profile on it for some investigative reporting. It did not go very far. If you like Mixed Signals, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts and feel free to review us.
If people want to know what you're up to next, where do they go?
Thanks for the throw, Ben. So friendly, my podcast bro. They can look for Smart Girl Dumb Questions wherever you get your shows on podcasts or YouTube, and we'll include links below too.
And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to Semaphore's media newsletter, which publishes every Sunday evening.
Happy New Year, everyone.